I did not go into 2025 thinking that I was going to get a literary agent, and I especially did not think I would get a literary agent by replying to her Instagram stories. Hello friends and enemies. Today we are going to be talking about the kind of weird way of how I got my literary agent. If you don't know me, hi, I'm Joelle Therese. I'm a content creator and recently agented romance writer who will travel anywhere for the plot and write simps, not tragedies. If you've been following me for a little bit, you know that I've been querying for the past 2-3 years or so with my Mafia Bodyguard romance book, aka what I lovingly call Mafia Ate or Mafia Ate Whip. And just recently, I have signed with Alex Land of Mad Woman Literary Agency for her to represent me in all of my literary works. I'm still processing everything, like it doesn't feel real yet. And it's almost been a month since she gave me the offer and I'm just like... So to understand just how rare this situation is, I'm gonna go through my querying journey, the actual offer itself, and then a few pieces of advice for anyone else who is on their querying journey or about to start their querying journey. But to give a quick summary of what Mafia Ate is about, the female main character Rosa is like the epitome of a girl boss. Not only is she secretly running her family's crime organization under her dad's name, she also owns and runs her own nightclub. She runs a mentorship program for undergrad students. She's busy being an older sister and mother figure to her 17-year-old sister Daisy. Oh, and she's also currently trying to evade hitmen from rival organizations. So after another assassination attempt, her father sits her down and says, "Hey, you need to get married and have a child so we can have an heir in case you get got. And you have to do this in 6 months or we're gonna name your younger sister your heir." And Rosa being Rosa and seeing the little cinnamon roll that her sister is, she's like, no way, I'm not gonna do that. So we're gonna get married in 6 months. So Baby Cakes is juggling all these things. So she really has no time for distractions, especially not in the form of the latest recruit and her newest bodyguard, Ken. Now Ken is a little softy, so it's kind of weird that he joined a mafia. Also, it's not exactly how he wanted to reconnect to his Filipino heritage because his grandma is Filipino. But you know what? You gotta do what you gotta do. And Baby Cakes needed to pay off the medical bills for his mom and also his grad school loans. What he didn't anticipate was finding a newfound family in all of these titos and titas and kuyas and ates, some of which may have a really high body count. And I'm not talking about the one in the bedroom. But speaking of bedrooms, what he didn't anticipate was falling in love and into the bed of the mafia princess. So with the clock ticking and another man's ring on her finger, Rosa and Ken have to decide who's more important, their families or each other. It's fun, it's spicy, it's angsty, we got diaspora feels, forbidden love feels, eldest daughter in an Asian household feels. Both Rosa and Ken are bisexual, so we have some bisexual disasters and disaster bisexuals. And they're both Filipino American and they're both from New York, like moi. So with that said, let's get into the querying stats. I have on my laptop my query tracker. I made a whole Google sheet of my querying journey, just like keeping track of who I was submitting to, what kind of responses I was getting. And as you can see, it's a lot of red. So to kind of condense it, I have put all of the query stats into a little document so I can read it off to you. So out of 30 queries that I had sent out, 18 were pitch event queries, 8 were cold queries, 2 were referrals. One of them was a pass from a colleague. So essentially I had sent a query to one agent. They felt like they weren't a good fit, but they sent it to someone else who they thought would be a good fit. And then one was an open submission call directly from a publisher. And also with the 18 pitch event queries, I had gotten 28 requests. So essentially I didn't send queries to 10 of those agents, sorry. Now out of the 30 queries that I had sent out, 6 of them requested fulls. And out of the 30 queries, 30 of them had rejected me. And to kind of give a breakdown on the rejections, 17 of them had sent me form rejections, which is kind of just like a standard reply being like, thank you, but I don't think I'm a good fit for you. 9 of them had sent me personalized rejections, so they gave me a little bit of feedback and some explanation as to why they were rejecting me. And then 4 of them were closed, no response, aka they basically just ghosted me. Now I won't go through like every single round of queries and whatnot that I had sent out, but I did 4 rounds of queries. Then for the pitch events, I submitted during API Pit 2022, Pitch Slam at Writer's Digest Conference in 2022, Queer Pit 2023, and DV Pit 2023. The first query I sent out was during API Pit 2022, which was like May 2022. And I officially took a break from querying in May 2024 when I had to pull my full request from an agent who had held it since April 2023. Looking back on it, it didn't look super stressful because it doesn't look like that on paper. It's like, Joelle, you only sent 30 queries over the course of 2 years. Like, why are you stressed out? So while I was querying, I wanted to be really selective on who I was sending my query package out to. When I was querying it, I was categorizing Mafia Ate as an adult contemporary romance. So I wanted to specifically look for agents who were representing that, but also other genres and age ranges like adult fantasy, young adult contemporary romance, young adult fantasy, because those were age ranges and genres that I had interest in writing in, so I wanted someone who would cover all the bases. I was surprised to find out that not too many agents did that, and a lot of the time agents weren't really looking for romances, they were looking for rom-coms. And like, I think Mafia Ate is kind of funny. It has like a kind of weird sense of humor. It has very like Filipino humor, I feel, but it's like not enough to make it a rom-com. So like, I would find an agent who would represent adult romance, but they wouldn't represent adult fantasy. Someone would represent romances for young adult, but not for adult. I also wanted an agent who was a woman of color, just so it was easier to relate to my story, because Mafia Ate is very Filipino American, and I wanted someone who would be able to see that in the book and not want to change anything to make it less Filipino American. It was just a lot of things happening. So I cast a very small net, and understandably, I didn't catch any fish. With that, I became very burnt out and I was like, okay, I'm gonna take a break from querying, from writing, and that is where my lovely agent Alex stepped in. One of the great things about the writing community on Twitter is that it was very easy to find each other and to support each other. Like, I'm pretty sure 90% of my writing friends, I found them through Twitter. So Alex and I became Twitter and Instagram mutuals in around 2021. I can't remember if at the time she was agented or if she had announced her book deal by that time, but back then, Alex and I were both Filipino American writers. We were pursuing traditional publishing. And so whenever one of us had posted about their project, had posted about some sort of writing news or whatever, Alex and I would be commenting on each other's stuff and just hyping each other up. So in January 2024, Alex DM'd me on Instagram asking, hey, have you considered querying my agent Amy? And I'm not sure if I had her on my radar at the time, but Alex was talking about that her agent was looking for new writers, especially Asian American women. And if I thought she was a good fit, Alex was willing to give me a referral for her agent, which like 1 was great, but 2, I had already gotten 2 referrals for 2 other agents and they both ultimately rejected me. So I was kind of feeling a little jaded and hesitant on having a referral, which like honestly didn't make too much sense, but I was very burnt out by this point. So Alex said she would send her agent an email about possibly getting a referral from me. And Alex asked me if she could read my book just so that she could see that's a good fit. So I sent Alex my manuscript so that she could see if there's like anything that I could also improve upon, any feedback that she has. Because another big thing about like being a writer and a great thing about having community with other writers is that they can help like read over your stuff. You could be beta readers, sensitivity readers. There's always someone to help you look over things. I didn't get feedback from her until around May 2024. She gave a lot of great feedback, but one that stood out to me and kind of made me laugh a little bit was her asking if I could add a paranormal slant to the book to hook readers in faster. She sent me most of her feedback in the middle of the night, so imagine me waking up at like 6:30 a.m. and being like, paranormal, what the fuck? Because also around that time, I had learned that some people were actually reading the title Mafia Ate as Mafia Ate. So a few people had been living under the assumption that the book was about cannibalism. And I was like, oh my gosh, do I actually have to make this about cannibalism? Is that what's gonna get me agented? I didn't say all that to Alex, but I did tell her that I kind of laughed a little bit because I read it at 6:30 a.m. and I was just like, I don't know what this feedback is. But a lot of her feedback was similar to the ones I was getting from beta readers, from agent rejections. Also, about a week after Alex gave me her feedback, she messaged me being like, hey, I don't know if you saw the news, but I'm actually now also an associate agent at Mad Women Literary Agency. She followed up by saying, I'm totally fine with continue reading Mafia Ate if you want as a reading peer, but I just want to let you know in case that was something you were not comfortable with. So I asked her what she was planning to rep, and she said adult young adult, middle grade, and mostly rom-coms, so I was like, okay, it shouldn't be a conflict of interest. We kind of left it at that. I hadn't reached out to her again about like reading the book or anything, kind of just because I wanted to take a break from it. I was about to go traveling. I dubbed it my hot Euro summer, and I actually posted a few of those vlogs on my channel, so if you want to check those out, you can. But while I was traveling, I was like, I'm not gonna think about writing, I'm not gonna think about querying, I'm only gonna bring my iPad with me, so I'm not gonna even really be able to do any intense writing. And also, I'm traveling around Europe. I'm gonna go sightseeing and do all these things, and I don't want to have to like stay in my hostel or some cafe or anything and write things. So it wasn't until I got back from my trip in the second half of 2024 that I feel like I was ready to go back into writing and to go back into querying. I was like, okay, I feel nice, I feel refreshed. So I took Alex's feedback and previous feedback I had gotten from Mafia Ate and kind of spent the second half of 2024 editing it and revising it and trying to like make Mafia Ate better. But honestly, 2025 has been a little bit chaotic and a lot of like ups and downs, so I haven't really focused too much on writing and querying and all of that stuff until I had DM'd Alex September 2025. So one day this past September, I was just scrolling through Instagram, going through Instagram stories as one does, when I saw on Alex's Instagram story that she was actually in New York City, which was kind of a big deal for me because I knew she wasn't from the area. I kind of knew she was in the Pacific Northwest, but I'm someone who gets really excited when someone's visiting New York, so I DM'd her being like, oh my gosh, are you in New York? And she replied, yes, I'm here for a writing conference, and that she was actually going to an event at the Rip Bodice bookstore in Brooklyn and wanted to see if I could join her. Unfortunately, I couldn't that day, so I asked her if she was free the next day since I was going into the city to do a meeting. This is what she told me next. Also, it looks like I do actually rep romance now, lol, so I can send you a formal email, but ... I'd love to work with you. So obviously I was very flabbergasted at the fact that she was just offering to represent me in Instagram DMs nevertheless. So I replied, OMG girly pop, but also, are you sure you don't want to read the full first before offering? I let her know that I had edited it a bit since we last spoke and since she gave me her initial feedback. And she was like, yeah, you can send it over to me. I'll also send you an official email like offering to represent you. And so about a week later, we got on the call to discuss all things agenting and whatnot. Except we couldn't talk about a key factor in all of this because she still hadn't read my full manuscript. So minus the fact that I couldn't ask her about like what she thought about the book, how much she thought that like it needed to be edited, the different editors she thought of sending it out to. I got to ask if she's very editorial, if she was willing to get on a call with me to talk about a part that I was stuck with the manuscript, what her communication style was like, what she's like while I'm on sub, what's the communication like between me, her, and my eventual editor when I finally get a publishing deal. So I feel like I was able to get through a lot of things on the call, and it kind of strengthened my decision to want to sign with her. So we scheduled a second call so she could read through the manuscript and actually give me feedback on it. And in between the first and second call, she also gave me contact information for some of her romance clients. So I spoke to 3 of their clients, and they're all kind of in different places in their publishing journey. 2 of them had just announced publishing deals, and 1 of them had just signed with Alex. So I kind of got a full scope of what it would be like to have Alex as an agent. And when I spoke to each of these clients, they all told me the amazing experiences they were having so far with Alex. They talked about how she's very detailed with her feedback, how willing she was to go on a call with you to talk about like any brainstorming ideas. And they mentioned that even though Alex is a newer agent, she has a lot of connections within the industry and she's getting a lot of mentorship and guidance from the older agents at her agency. So after speaking with all of them, I hopped onto the second call and we got to talk a little bit more about the manuscript, her ideas for it. And it was during the second call that I had agreed to have her represent me as my literary agent. She didn't have my edit letter just yet, but she sent it, I think, the next day. So I got to sit with it and kind of let it marinate and look at all the feedback. And so about another week later, we hopped onto a third call to discuss more about the edit letter, our vision for it, and setting a deadline for when my first round of edits would be due to her. And it's just been like a wild journey from start to finish, and I'm still kind of looking at it just being like, oh my gosh, I'm like working on this and someone wants to read it and needs to have it done by a certain amount of time. So with all of that said, here's my advice for anyone else who is currently querying or is thinking about querying soon or a little bit later down the line. 1. Polish your manuscript as much as possible. Now, I know I got my agent with a pretty messy manuscript. I would not recommend that to anyone, not even to my worst enemy. Like, the manuscript has gone through a few rounds of revisions before getting to its current state. Like, my queries were not first drafts. Like, I spent time and I had beta readers go through it and like edit and polish it as much as I could before I sent that first query. With that said, polish it as much as you can, get feedback from other writers, from readers in that genre and age range. I was very fortunate to have a lot of eyes on the manuscript before I got to query, and even during the querying process itself, because things change from the moment you start the manuscript to even while you're still on the querying journey. And that's why it's also really important to send out your queries in batches like I did, because you can get feedback from those first few queries from other people who have read it and improve it as you're going along. Which kind of brings me to my next point, is build a community. I was very lucky to find a big community of other writers on Twitter before it became that site. And quarantine writing Twitter was a very specific time period too, I will admit that. Everyone was inside, like what else are we gonna do except write our manuscripts and be on social media? So through that, I was able to connect with other people online from all over the world. We got to hype each other up on our manuscripts. We got to celebrate each other's wins on their publishing journeys. And that's also where I got to give feedback to other writers, and other writers were able to give me feedback. I did manuscript swaps, I did beta reading for other people, and at the time there was also a lot of Twitter events where people can connect to other writers who were either agented, querying, drafting, wherever they were in their journey. And like I said before, majority of my writing friends were from Twitter and from social media, and one of them eventually became my agent. Now, don't go around trying to befriend people in the hopes that they can become your agent. When I first befriended Alex, I didn't know that she was going to become an agent, let alone my agent. I just saw that she was another Filipino American writer, and she had a really cool book that she was writing. By the way, it's called Damned If You Do, which is like Buffy the Vampire Slayer meets Filipino folklore. Wrap that all up into a high school stage manager. I was just excited that someone was writing this really cool book, especially because I am also a theater girl and a stage crew girl. So if you're going to befriend anyone else in the industry, whether they're a fellow writer, an agent, an editor, do it because you genuinely want to be friends with them, not because you're just trying to network with them. And my final piece of advice is that querying and traditional publishing in general is just really weird. You can follow all the steps on how to write a book, how to query, how to get an agent, how to get a publishing deal, and whatnot. But sometimes that just doesn't go according to plan or your plan. So be willing to pivot, be willing to take a break from things, and just know that similar to how no two books are alike, no two publishing journeys are alike either. I know many people who got their agent through traditional querying process, but I also know a lot of people who didn't get their agent that way. I'm kind of in the category of people who got their agent in a kind of weird way. Now I'm just wow, I guess that can happen too. I can tell you not to stress about it and whatever, blah, blah, blah. It's easier said than done. But what I can say is be open to things, even if they're not the way you thought it would go. Because I did not go into 2025 thinking that I was going to get a literary agent. And I especially did not think I would get a literary agent by replying to her Instagram stories. But I hope that gives you a little bit of perspective of just how wild and chaotic querying can be. As always, thank you for joining me in my yapping. Stay safe, stay warm, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Bye!